because we love the cloud. I think we are recording, and I think we're live on Facebook. So I'd like to say hello to everybody. Hello, everybody. My name,
hello,
John Troyer. You are listening to or watching or somehow consuming a live webinar video call with a bunch of people who are at either VMworld Europe mostly or VMworld US. This is a recap. This is the second recap I've done. A couple of weeks ago, we did another recap of people from VMworld US. The date is September the 15th. It's 8 o'clock in the morning in the US. In California, it is Friday afternoon or evening in the UK, where many of these folks are. It looks like we have, and I'll let people introduce themselves as they come up, in Europe. And let's see, we don't have anybody, UK and Europe. I think that's what we're doing here right now. Anyway, we're going to talk about VMworld and how it was, what we think about how the show was, what our experiences are, what some thoughts were. We've got some analysis from the CTO advisor later, and so we'll just kick it off. This is an experiment, so thank you all for joining us. Hey, so first off, I'm just going to open this up to the panel. We thought for VMworld US that it was pretty good, right? It seemed this year seems like VMware's year. Seemed like things were up, things were more energy, product news. It just seemed like a better show. I'll throw it open to the panel. What do you think?
I'll start. It's Barry Coombs from definetomorrow.co.uk. I was over at the Barcelona event, and kind of as you touched upon there, John, there was a real positive vibe, I think, around the event. I think it was the biggest one in Europe ever, so I was told. And I think what we've started to see come together is VMware have been talking around a strategy for the last 2 to 3 years. I think they got a little bit lost on the way with vCloud Air and where that was going. But we've started to see kind of a bit of a coming together of strategies and actually starting to deliver on the things that they've been promising. Obviously trying to get themselves into a position to be not the cloud provider, but the cloud player that allows you to connect multiple environments together. Obviously, VMware on top of AWS starting to now come together. And obviously seen a very initial release of that GA'd in America, and lots of talk and sessions around that. For me, we'll come to it later, but the EUC vision is also fully there as well. Obviously, they've been on a long fighting battle up against Citrix for the last 5 or so years to become a serious player. And I think we're starting them to start to take the lead now. So yeah, positive show. Be interested to get people's thoughts and opinions on the solutions exchange. The industry is consolidating a lot. So I'm not quite sure if the reflection of the industry at the show is kind of a glowing element as much as it once was. But I think, yeah, as you say, VMware's year.
Okay. Thumbs up from Barry. Anybody else want to jump in? How do you think of the show in general?
Okay, Andrea Mauro from the infrastructure from Italy. I found the general session mostly a repetition of the US, but this probably was due to the change of the date. 2 weeks after are too few for the European edition. Next year probably will be better because it will be in November, so more distance between the 2 events. I really like to see Alan Renouf on the general session because it was like a story from everybody that has came from the community a lot of years ago, and now was making a demo, and this was really appreciated for all. About the technical story in the second day, maybe I see that some people have liked it, other not. But what I think is that was a good try to explain. No, I'm serious about this.
Yeah, it was a good try.
We are always talking about the digital transformation, but we don't say how. We don't explain how make it. So this I think was a good try to explain how a company can handle a digital transformation using VMware products and solutions. So from this point of view, I appreciate this, of course.
Yeah, I like what they were trying to do. I didn't love the story; kind of lost me. But but Andrea, did you? So overall, you thought it was a good year for the conference and VMware in general? Yes.
Yeah, I see. I see a little shift on the content in the VMworld, but this probably reflects also how VMware has changed its position to the companies, because several years ago, VMware was talking with technical people inside the company, and the technical people was mostly the promoters, the sponsor of VMware adoption. Now VMware is talking directly with the C-level, and probably also the VMworld is changing in its approach, at least in the general session, and try to be more oriented on something that is more sales pitch, but mostly focus on the C-level, trying also to make technical people happy with some products on some demos, but I see this change, honestly.
That's actually fascinating, Andrea, and maybe is true, right? I think my previous strategy was always just to go to the keynote, and I figured I could get the technical stuff, like the high-level stuff, and then I would just talk to people. This year, it did seem more targeted at maybe business transformation. Maybe it's not for us geeks anymore. I don't know. Anybody else? What do you think of? Are the geeks no longer welcome at the VMworld keynotes? Did you have a time? What do you think?
Actually, I tweeted this out last night, so it's kind of right on time. I have this running theory from, I'm consuming the innovator's dilemma. And one of the challenges that VMware, Cisco, IBM to a lesser extent, but all of the major tech vendors have, is that technology is getting democratized, and it is a tool and not a business upon itself. We've enjoyed the luxury as being engineers going to these big shows and they being geared towards us. And the truth, I didn't like the Elastic Sky piece of use case, but the truth is that if VMware, Cisco, and all these big enterprise companies customers are only engineers and geeks, long term they're going to go out of business. So they have to start to talk to the business. This business transformation that Andrea made a great point, that it was a great attempt at changing the conversation and going up stack and starting to appeal to a broader audience long term for VMware. And I think VMware at least made a great attempt at starting to have a different conversation. So it's not that VMworld is not just is not for geeks anymore. It's not only for geeks anymore.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think when I'm completely with you with Elastic Sky Pizza thing, lost me, but I appreciated the demonstration part of it, I suppose. I kind of try and capture the whole of the VMworld during the keynotes for the doodles that I do, and that wasn't really possible this year because, as you say, the technical detail of the announcements and the GAs weren't there. But the thing they did do, certainly in Europe, and I assume they did the same in the US, was they did keynote sessions on the individual subject matter. So if you were really interested in EUC, I went to the EUC keynote and I got a lot more technical detail there. I got some really good technical demonstrations, things like Sean Bass, and we haven't had that kind of. You've been able to go extremely deep in a specific technology, obviously in a breakout session, but if you wanted to go deep in one of the kind of pillars of VMware before, there's never really been that point outside of the keynote.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's maybe my new strategy. Hey, we also have here joining us Torsten Volk, a real live analyst.
Very good morning.
Torsten, we were talking about Europe. I think you were just at the US show, but
yeah.
Is VMworld now safe for executives, and do the techies need to dig their own gold, or what do you think? Where's VMware on this?
It's the ambition. DevOps is the big ambition. We see VMware is all crazy about DevOps, right? And they're trying to get the executives there, and they're trying to get their developers there, and ideally they try and get the development and IT automation and configuration management stuff on the floor. But I think it's a process, right? I think this year it was still the majority of IT operations, of administrators. And I think the big key moment was when Michael Dell in Vegas was on stage on day 2, and they were starting to talk about containers and PKS, but the applause and the enthusiasm was limited, right? It was on the analyst side, it was great, right? I thought finally, they have their container strategy, finally they're converging Pivotal and the rest of the VMware portfolio and doing a container management strategy that makes sense. And then the audience seemed to be kind of lukewarm at best. So I think it's the ambition, but we are not quite there yet.
Well, maybe let's go there. I was going to go to AWS, VMware on AWS, but let's go to DevOps for a second. So everybody, we talked, I don't know, before we hit record, I think we mentioned the word DevOps. I didn't see any DevOps vendors there or consultants there. I guess there was a little one in Europe. So maybe that's aspirational, but if you were an IT shop looking and you have developers crawling up your behind asking for help to manage their container sprawl or something, you weren't going to find it at VMware. I don't know. Does anybody want to talk about DevOps? Was that really a DevOps show?
A lot of them went to Jenkins World at the same time. I mean, instead of going to VMworld, a lot of the vendors, instead of spending their money there, spent it at Jenkins World. Was really interesting. And that was this year compared to last year, the floor was smaller.
I do wonder if the sort of DevOps influence had that kind of influence on the keynotes, in that as techies we're kind of all expecting that one last thing and that big announcement, is it a new version of vSphere or something like that? And that's no longer kind of happening. And that's maybe because VMware are releasing products and features a lot more often, vSANs every 6 months, NSX with minor point versions is bringing big features in. So they're trying to get away from that in the keynotes. I think DevOps itself, there were some breakout sessions around PKS and things like that. And in Europe, we had CloudBees and Puppet just kind of off to the side, but they were there. And I think there was a story there if you dug around, but it didn't necessarily come across.
Chris, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, sorry. Yeah, so I'm Chris Porter. You can find me Upright Vinyl, and I work infrastructure architect in banking. And although I don't like to brag about it too much, and I got ribbed for this at VMworld, I'm Virtual Design Master 005. So look that up. It's well worth having a play with the designs and the videos and stuff online. And Gareth, who's also here, is second last year, fourth this year. He's But thanks for having me on.
Well, congratulations. Well, I think maybe the big news of the show was VMware on AWS and VMware Cloud on AWS. Let's get the name right. I'm in honor of VMware's. That was like my 10th. I don't know. I've been going to VMworld since 2005, however many years that is. I'm wearing my show shirt from like 2009 or 10 or somewhere in there. So I'm kicking it old school.
Wow.
Button down. Nice. That was VMware was a button down company back then, huh?
Classy. Yeah. It was a classy joint.
They'll bring money on eBay.
If anybody wants it, let me know. I'm just going to it's going to go to Goodwill otherwise. It's actually ironed and everything. So let's talk about VMware Cloud and AWS. Obviously, huge before the show. They were pumping it up. It was at the show. It was at the keynote. Keith, you just wrote a big article on it. You want to talk a little bit about your take on it?
Yeah, so I didn't introduce myself. Keith at CTO Advisor on Twitter, thectoadvisor.com's website. But, John, we've talked about this both on the Cube stage, pre the VMworld, and coming up to it. This is a solution I want to love. I mean, I literally, because from technically to think about what VMware did, AWS doesn't change their infrastructure for anyone. So for VMware to convince AWS to get bare metal workloads in there, figure out the VPC and network integration with NSX, tremendous technical accomplishment. But you go upstack to kind of, what's the business value of this whole solution? If I wanted to host VMware in the cloud, I have Rackspace, CenturyLink, OVH. I have a ton of different options out in the market today. How is this any different than those other solutions? The cynical version of me wants to say, you know what? This is just a checkbox from a CIO perspective. I need to get stuff in the cloud. I need an easy win. If I go to my CFO or CEO and tell them I now have workloads, 90% of our workloads are in AWS, that's politically, I've been in these conversations. Politically, that's a huge, huge win, and we can't discount that. That was the initial set of thoughts. Then I thought about this over a period of time. And yesterday, beginning of the week after talking to VMware, it kind of finally clicked that this competitively isn't a solution that competes against VMware's ecosystem partners. But funny enough, it competes against EC2 itself. If you break down the math on utilization, and I think our good friends over at Cloud Physics, Ifran and crew, did their own analysis before I did mine, surprisingly. It is cheaper than EC2. If you're going to do a lift and shift to the cloud, more than likely it will be cheap. If you're a large enough organization, there needs to be scale because it's a minimum of like $207,000 a year for a 1 year commit. But if you have enough workloads, it's cheaper from a workload per workload comparison than EC2. So it is, if you have, lift and shift as your, thou shalt lift and shift to the cloud, VMware Cloud on AWS is probably a much better solution to go to. It's less risk. You're taking the same operating model you have today and just putting it in AWS. So you get both check marks of, hey, I have stuff in AWS. I went from CIO politically, and then organizationally, I don't make any changes to my organization other than the rack and stackers are kind of need to move up stack.
I got to speak to Pat Gelsinger in one of the sessions, and one of the things that he was really, really proud about was that point you've just made around pricing. He said, what a lot of people haven't realized is just look at the pricing. We've got an amazing deal here. If you want to get onto Amazon, if you want to kind of focus on moving stuff to the cloud, we got the right pricing.
And how important do you guys think it is that that there's no cost to move from VMware on EC on AWS to services, to VMware services like RDS and all of the other services that they offer? Is that a risk of the applications flowing from VMware there, never coming back, or do you see that differently?
I think the attach rate is going to be close to zero. That's my prediction. But I'd love to be wrong.
Yeah.
For me, the whole VMware Cloud on AWS, it sort of smacks of a tactical solution, not a long-term solution. And I think that from VMware's point of view, if you've got you've got AWS starting to eat up the traditional data center workloads, then from VMware's point of view, they're still going to be having a slice of that pie. And I think, as you say, from AWS point of view, it's an on-ramp to get workloads into native AWS stuff. So for me, it kind of works for both people, but it is a sort of tactical solution. In the long term, I think we'll be seeing workloads sort of getting that next generation designed for cloud native apps, all that sort of stuff. It'll be happening actually within AWS. So I certainly don't see that as a long-term solution for cloud. I think we'll be seeing it as a tactical solution for a lot of companies.
Well, Sam, they put a huge amount of work in that work, right? There's a huge amount of software underneath that. So that's a lot of, for you saying it's a tactical solution, and for maybe even Keith saying it's kind of a tactical solution, there was a huge amount of engineering to make AWS bare metal provisioning happen, with VMware on top of it, and all the storage and all the networking and all the clustering and all the management there.
Yeah. So there's some additional value here. So obviously the VMware team, I haven't thought highly of VMware's cloud products prior to VMware Cloud on AWS. So they're sensitive to when I reach out to them and say that, hey guys, I'm getting a negative kind of vibe from this long term, they're sensitive to make sure that I understand the solution. And some of the stuff that they talked about in the future, which I didn't get a chance to talk about at the show, which becomes really interesting. because one of the things that I challenged them on is that IBM is a very capable organization. From a cloud, if you look at kind of their documentation set for VCF, vCloud Foundation in IBM's Blue Mix or whatever they call their cloud service, IBM did some seriously great engineering work to make that happen. But one of the advantages that VMware and AWS has is the integration of services into legacy VMware environments. And one of the use cases that they gave me was pretty interesting. The ability to back vSAN with elastic, with EBS, with elastic block storage. And that became super interesting.
Okay.
Or even what if I can attach object storage, S3 storage directly to my VMware environment, vSAN with elastic, with EBS. That creates the ability to create brand new applications that I just simply can't create, at least not economically, in a vSphere environment or in a AWS environment because of just the way AWS is designed with networking. So I walked back and I said, you know what? This is pretty not just tactical. If VMware, we're still very early in this cloud thing. $4 billion in revenue last quarter was AWS, still, bigger than VMware. But we're still really early in this cloud thing. And we, in enterprise, when I say we, the enterprise, we haven't figured out cloud yet and how we're really going to use it. So maybe VMware and AWS is onto something that we're not seeing yet. I'll give them that much.
I like that. Okay, I like that. I like that story with the vSAN and EBS. That's actually kind of interesting. I don't know, Torsten, do you cover this space, or did they? You're the actual professional analyst here.
Yeah, well, I mean, every time I talk to VMware, I also felt I agree very much with Sam what he said about the boxes to check. On the one hand, so a lot of the VMware staff and even the executive staff is definitely concerned about it, but the party line is we have to give choice, right? It has been the party line last year too about any, right? Last year it was any, but nobody really understood why the whole VMworld said any. I mean, we always were joking any as long as it's all VMware. But this year it's become more credible, right? You can feel a cultural change within VMware, whether that's the container guys, whether that's the Cloud Foundation guys, whether that's the VRA guys specifically. I mean, they have all made a shift toward, if we, what we've been saying for years, right? If we keep resisting, then the customer will do what they want, then they go straight to EC2. So to that degree, it's a tactical solution, but there's other interesting points, as I think he said about the vSAN piece, right? I mean, they also started pushing software-defined hyperconvergence now against a lot of the other guys. And if they get this integration done, and if they get this hybrid solution done, and it's a similar solution to what IBM has, but with a bigger base, right? The virtualization customers of VMware are they run a lot deeper than a lot of what IBM has. They have a better position to get into those accounts and expand their footprint compared to IBM. Then they do have a play there, and they have spent a lot of work on this hybrid thought, and the cloud services they've launched a little bit early because they had to for this VMworld. So it was, the code base is converging between online and on-site. And if they get this hybrid solution thing going where they can say something that Amazon cannot say easily, that you can manage it all with one set of tools and you can shift your workload from the cloud to the data center and back, and policy-driven provisioning, and then those cloud services start really having documented APIs and working the way that a fully featured cloud service should work, and very quickly. And then containers also becomes a cloud service, a PKS becomes a cloud service somehow. And they've launched this lifecycle tool in Barcelona to address the installation of VRA. So all of this becomes a story that makes it more approachable and attacks that issue that VMware has had for a long time, where it was just the cloud storage just didn't all fit together. So I think there's a couple of aspects to it. One, giving people really choice, and the other one, really being heterogeneous and stopping to basically say we have only one good solution and that's ours, not the booksellers. So
Torsten makes a really great point. And remember where this revenue trajectory is going. I haven't done the math, but AWS bigger than VMware already. If VMware positions itself as a must-have add-on to AWS, that's still a very good growth business for VMware. So if companies need to make the migration to cloud and these legacy workloads never go anywhere and VMware positions itself as a must-have add-on to AWS, even if they just become part of the AWS ecosystem, that's probably still a much bigger company than what VMware is today.
It's better than vCloud Air, right?
Much better than vCloud Air.
Was anybody a vCloud Air reseller here? Yeah.
That says something about the state of innovation. If that's the only hope for VMware, though, surely. I mean,
No. Hey, let's talk. Let's go to the fun stuff in a minute. Let's talk about product. Let's stay with the products for a second before we go into a B school rat hole here. Barry, can you get us? Was there any? Tell us just the cool part about the EUC news from these VMworlds.
I mean, I think it's the fact that the strategy is coming together when it comes to EUC. I mean, you got to be very careful, and I think that's the whole theme of the show. That when we all used to go to VMworld 5-6 years ago, we went to go see what was latest with vSphere. What we're going to be able to go back to the home lab and then be able to then go and enable and do what's next. But VMware is just so desperate now. I mean, we were saying it wasn't really a DevOps show, but how do you make something as wide as VMworld with so many products a DevOps show? Because 3/4 of the audience are going to go to sleep.
Right.
You get the same problem with.
And in the US, it was the AirWatch show was combined with it too, right? So it was even more mobile and stuff.
That's it, and it's the same in Europe as well. So with EUC, it's come together. VMware kind of really got the message a few years ago with the AirWatch acquisition with the company, I forget who it was, where they bought Mirage in. EUC is more than about virtual desktops. It's about anything the user wants to do, but IT still managing to kind of control that. And real sense of that coming together. People like Sean Bass on stage was absolutely amazing because the guy's got so much passion for it. He's lived and breathed it. He's been a blogger, done a lot of work for Citrix in the past, and to be able to actually see that coming in to fruition now. Obviously, everything's now focusing on identity. And if we have a look at the way that the users are consuming in the kind of software as a service world, how do you kind of secure the desktop? It's all got to be around identity, and certainly the products that are integrated with Workspace ONE are all. Is
Workspace ONE the real deal, Barry? Is it good?
I think so. I mean, it started off with, is it just kind of a marketing wrapper around a load of existing products, whereas now we're seeing quite heavy integration, seeing obviously things like NSX coming into that picture as well. We did see App Express get announced, which was a relationship with Frame, which I don't think anyone was really expecting. And that's going to be quite interesting to see how that integrates. The whole premise around that is being able to very quickly, very easily roll out legacy applications in the cloud, so you don't almost have to think about them, putting them on VDI or RDS servers. You can kind of do next, and it's spun up in AWS or Azure and will just run whenever it needs to run. And that's very cool technology, but it does overlap with a lot that's already in sort of Horizon and things like that as well.
Oh, interesting. Well, you mentioned NSX. Maybe unless folks have some questions, wrap back around. But I was going to move, going once, going twice. Anybody?
Gareth here.
Go.
Gareth Edwards at Gareth Edwards 86, virtualizedfruit.co.uk or Home Tech Cast. I'm hiding many places. I've got a kind of second with Barry. There is EUC is a big push. It's certainly changed my way of where we're going to start pushing our systems. Coming from a Citrix kind of environment, do I really need to start looking at Horizon desktops again? How things are done, Workspace ONE. I think the term coined secret source came in a lot from Pat, being NSX. Is part of that, is NSX going to be the secret source to things? We talk about VMware on AWS. Is there any way that you're going to start spinning desktops up there? So do you really care where things are? It's all about, as Barry said, that consumption model. All your users care. I want my app. I want it now. How do I get it now? And I don't want to be going to IT frustrated. And it's just really interesting for me. Is just flipping back a little bit. Is I've seen a lot of people bolt off to Amazon and come to me going, well, actually, this whole news. Well, I want to get back out of EC2. I want to get back to my VMware I want to cuddle it. I want my VMs back. And someone's already touched on the really interesting point is the no kind of ingress charges. That is, if that's gone, and you can shift stuff between the AWS cloud and Amazon, well, actually, does that then some of your big monolithic apps send them up there, talk to your new serverless fancy stuff for your developers? Can you reduce some costs there as well? That's one thing I want to start researching into as well.
Yeah, I think this VMworld really emphasized the NSX as a secret sauce in all the different portfolios, right? For containers, and I have to say, for containers, I understand it conceptually, and I think, yes, it addresses the key issue from a tech perspective. I don't think it's dead. I think they're still working on this. But for containers, it's amazing, right? Because that's the key issue. You were just mentioning end-user computing. The same is true for the cloud services. I mean, NSX is now basically what separates them from the pack, right? Amazon doesn't have that. Nobody else has it. So ACI, maybe from Cisco, is trying to claim a similar role because they have a good footprint and they have a lot more adoption. I mean, adoption in a sense that customers own it, maybe not use it, but yeah, that I found really interesting. NSX everywhere.
Well, and you've only got to look at kind of the theme of security. Micro-segmentation is seen as that secret sauce to answer a lot of problems that we've got going on in the world at the moment. And you've only got to speak to the execs at VMware and you kind of look at this multi-cloud world. Okay, multi-cloud is very cool, but you need something that's going to gel all this together to offer security and connectivity. And VMware are doing a very good job of certainly preaching that NSX is the answer to all these problems and it is going to cure the world's problems, I suppose.
Well, one of us here on this panel, coincidentally, actually is making a big bet on NSX. Sam, would you like to introduce yourself and talk about the new job you're starting?
Yeah, so I'm Sam McGeown, a blogger on definite.co.uk. But as of Monday, I'll be joining the PSO practice in the NSX PSO practice in EMEA. So I'll actually be I'm actually sort of shifting emphasis from sort of the cloud and automation to NSX and still obviously with a foot into that. But yeah, I am, as you say, making a bet on NSX. And I guess the show really confirmed a lot of the things that went into my decision making around that choice. I had a choice of whether I move into sort of an SDDC role at VMware or whether I join as part of the NSX practice. And actually the choice I made was based on the fact that I think NSX, I've said it for a while now, that the person who sort of conquers the mobility and interconnectivity and sort of is able to make the communication between cloud platforms easy and not have to worry about all these things, they're going to win. And I think that NSX is now on the brink of being able to really offer that sort of connectivity secured between lots of different cloud platforms, and that's what enables that cloud mobility, and that's what enables you to consume the right cloud platform at the right time and connect different cloud platforms together. So for me, yeah, it is a sort of a bet on NSX, but I think it's a fairly safe bet given all the emphasis over the VMworld US and EU. I think NSX is really exciting. It's going to be a really good place to be.
I think it's good to see that NSXT version 2 was announced and released. I mean, no doubt that's the future of the way things are going. Obviously, absolutely. NSXV is very cool, but it's very VMware centric, and T allows that to kind of go all over the place, really.
Mm.
Yeah. So I'm looking back on this. Sorry, I'm looking back on this. Because I saw VMware use the term cloud glue. And that term came, I'm like, that sounds very familiar. And I wrote a post in 2015 and I called NSX Cloud Glue. I should have copyrighted it. But when NSX works as promised, and it's not there, I want to make sure we highlight that. NSX, exceptionally great idea. It is from a production sense, not where I've talked to the vCAN providers, and vCAN is doing some really cool stuff. And I have to correct myself because VMware marketing will slap my hand. The VMware Cloud Partners is now in the vCAN, is what used to be called vCAN, doing really interesting stuff with sharing capacity, making kind of like the different data centers invisible, even in that vCAN offering, and it gives them the ability to share capacity amongst cloud providers. So going back to EUC, just think about it with NSXT 2.0. In theory, I can place virtual desktops in EC2 with NSXT running on top of that, and place that anywhere in the world in Amazon's directory, and make my EUC deployment basically invisible. Put desktops closest to where those apps are at, so I can manage my virtual desktops in a way that elastically I could never have done before, because it was just too cost prohibitive. So NSX as an idea and concept, amazing capability. Where it's at maturity wise, I've been in the throes of a large scale NSX V deployment, and this is something that VMware and VMware customers are going through hand in hand, early adopters, learning where it works well and where there still needs to be some development and thought out. But as far as the cloud glue piece of it, you know what? I'm really on board for traditional use cases. I'm still a little bit when it comes to PaaS, serverless, and what I call cloud native. There's really not a play there that I can see yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's talked to a guy on the plane, right? And he said, I have 35 hosts, and yes, NSX is intriguing, but I don't know. I don't have the guys to get it done, right? And what do you tell him? As maybe an interesting question, Sam, who just joined the services team, right? What do you tell that guy? How do you make it approachable? Because I know there is a couple of tools like the NSX Cloud Service that is kind of bringing that in as a service, and the new PKS should also kind of make it part of the solution. But then how do you extend the footprint? Because I think that's a big issue with NSX, where there is a pilot and then there's a small group using it, but the footprint is just relatively small, and the number of customers is large, which sounds impressive, but they don't tell you how deep they go, right?
Yeah, well, I think it's still relatively new in the data center. It's still, a few years ago we were all making money doing vSphere designs. I don't think anyone's doing vSphere designs now, right? You have people doing cloud designs. PSO delivering the more automation-based, SDDC-based stuff rather than just a plain vSphere design. And that's because it became a sort of commoditized thing. vSphere, it's there. And I think what we'll see is NSX-V in its current form will become more commodity, and people will be more used to it. And as NSXT comes through the pipeline, part of the practice that I'm involved in is responsible for doing that. So taking the new stuff, the NSXT deployments, actually figuring out how we deliver that, and then that becomes more commoditized and begins to become, it goes into the SDDC practice, and that becomes more sort of general and less specialist. And you see that happening throughout, the industry. That's how stuff goes from becoming niche to becoming commodity to becoming nobody even thinks about it anymore. So, I mean, for me, NSX is fantastic when you start automating it. That's where it gets, really comes alive. The problem with NSX-V is around scale. So when you automate NSX-V at scale, you run into issues. Things like the number of rule sets you can do, you run into issues quite quickly with large scale automated deployments because you just run out of scale. NSXT solves a lot of those problems, and I'm just sort of really getting into NSXT. I spent a lot of time in NSXT sessions VMworld, and I think a lot of the things that were issues are no longer going to be issues. I think it's a fantastic step forward in terms of maturity of the product, and NSX-V, it is what it is. But T is what we're really waiting for. If you're following it, it's going to be solving a lot more of those issues for me.
And how's this doing against ACI? Sorry, John.
Say again?
I was just wondering how is this doing against ACI, right? There's a lot of ACI technically out there, but not really used in the way that NSX is used. Do you guys have a take on that?
Yeah, I've written a lot about ACI versus NSX, and at the onset, I know from a marketing perspective and from a blogger and press perspective, people like to pit the two together.
Right.
And in theory, they should work. If you have enough money, you should buy both.
But nobody does.
One is the underlay and the other one is the overlay. And VMware does really well with the overlay. ACI, if you're a all Cisco shop, kind of makes sense. And the two together, we've always said as customers, we want the two to work together versus, this faux marketing and competition thing saying, NSX shall never love anything ACI. As a customer, we just want them both to work well together.
I think the difficulty with all of these things, with both NSX and ACI, is actually they're a bundle of different core products, and you could talk about using ACI for microsegmentation or NSX for layer 2 stretch or all sorts of SDN, these pieces, and where these conversations sometimes get confused. And it's also where you look at the cloud glue, is that being able to have a ubiquity security policy across AWS and also applying that on premises and those kind of places, or is that being able to stretch and move workloads between them, or is it a combination of all of those? I think I'd say to that guy you were talking to with 35 hosts, actually, if you want to look at dropping microsegmentation in, that's fairly straightforward into that kind of environment. Trying to put VTAP and VXLAN and edge routing and those kind of pieces, that's where that kind of gets complicated. And you do gain a lot with the microsegmentation piece on its own. So I think sometimes there is a struggle with marketing for NSX when all of that gets bundled into. If you want to adopt NSX, you have to do all of that complex networking, when actually that's not necessarily the case to get a lot of some of the benefits. And it's interesting.
That's what we're seeing as well, Chris. As you're saying, it is the marketing problem. It's very much pitched as automation, as security, and as the cloud glue between everything. And people that are then trialing it and trying to get their head around it, assuming they've got to try and attempt to do everything, and they almost end up dashing around like a blue-ass fly trying to figure out what you're going to do with this, when actually just focusing on a small bit such as microsegmentation. And I suppose the beauty of microsegmentation is it doesn't have to start so micro. It can start as bigger chunks, and then you can get it smaller and smaller and smaller over time. And then someone like Sam would come in and then go, hey guys, why don't you then automate this? And then the microsegmentation then gets easier, and then you build upon it and build upon it. Nice.
Okay, well, I guess the word of the day is the tip of the day is microsegmentation. It's the year of microsegmentation finally.
Sorry, John.
Go ahead.
I think the guys are right in, and the piece that I think everyone's missed, this is just personally for me and some of the projects I'm looking at, is it still really helps traditional data centers. I'm refreshing 2 data centers, and can I go back to having a true private cloud where I can just throw workloads between the two? Do I need to care where anything is sat anymore?
There's still physics, man.
This is just personally for me, some of the projects I'm looking at. But it's just intriguing for me. If I want to fail over from A to B, do I still need these run books and crazy networking? I actually think for anything, it makes it a little bit easier for me rather than re-IPing stuff and stuff like that. That's still something fundamental where I think it's going to help me day to day. And as you said, that micro-segmentation can start coming with new projects. If I'm re-architecting that point rather than trying to retrofit it.
I think a problem still comes in this day and age as well. I suppose someone like yourself, Gareth, could take a lot from that, a lot of benefits from that. You leave the company. Where do you find the next NSX guys then come in and take over from that? You can probably find 100 Cisco guys that could come and sort your problems out for you.
Not necessarily if they've got ACI, because that's
one thing that I'd say, someone on the crowd chat that we were doing said about NSX that once you've moved away from the hardware and you're into the software solution, it's not only about just that, but how you layer solutions on top of that as well. Once it's software, it opens up a whole different world of stuff. So I think, as I said, NSX is starting to gain traction. There will be more and more, and it will become more commoditized, but then there's also going to be other solutions and other things that layer on top of NSX. And I think that's that's just a matter of time. It's not really something you're going to see happen quickly.
I think that's a really interesting piece for NSX Cloud, which is on AWS. So at the moment, you get fairly basic security groups and things like that with AWS. It's great because it's logical. So it's true micro-segmentation, but it's limited in what you can do with those security groups. But you put NSX on the cloud and you start using NSX, then you can start to do that service insertion piece and add those things on top of where you're limited to what you can just do natively in AWS.
Mm-hmm. And will it mainstream it? Will the NSX cloud service mainstream it, Chris or Sam? I mean, I'm very curious. I mean, can a standard networking guy, can you tell the guy who runs IT for a nonprofit and doesn't have NSX guys, can you tell them, hey, here's how you get started with the NSX cloud service, and then you get basic functionality and you expand the footprint and your guys learn as they go? Or does he have to hire specialists for that still?
I think what's interesting actually with NSX is almost VMware have accepted that it's fairly complicated to manage, in that if you look at the VMware Cloud on AWS piece, they've put this Cloud Manager UI to manage the NSX piece. So they're not exposing NSX Manager initially. So that is, I don't know whether that's sort of saying we need to simplify it, or there's some complications with NSX Manager. I guess with NSX Cloud, you can trial that, so it's a good way to get sort of stuck in and see what you can add there. I don't know, Sam, if you've got any thoughts on that.
No, I mean, I've not really done anything specific with NSX Cloud. But I mean, as I said before, a few years ago, it would be tricky to find someone with all the vSphere skills to design, just a plain vSphere installation. Now, everyone does their own. Nobody hires PSO to do a vSphere design, right? Everyone does it themselves. And what's going to happen is it will become more commoditized. It will become easier to consume.
And standard networking guys will do it. So basically, it's kind of a gateway drug, the NSX cloud service, and then they will get into it so much that they can start designing it, or is that not realistic?
I don't know. I think everyone's jobs get closer together, right? I'm not traditionally a networking guy, but I'm doing NSX. I used to manage switches, but only on a very light level. And I think, networking guys need to learn virtualization guys need to learn networking. There's this, cloud is collapsing all of these silos, and if you don't.
Some of these discussions are really hard, right? Because we don't put time frames in, right? Are you talking now in September? Are you talking next year? Are you talking 5 years from now? In 5 years, everything's inevitable. But that's why some of the cloud things are a little frustrating for me, because people sometimes are arguing, but yet they're talking maybe different years. Hey, let's move on to some different stuff. Talk about the hackathon. Folks who are in it. The hackathon was really big this year at VMworld. Tell us about it.
Yeah. I keep saying, everyone I meet is just, if you get the chance, just go and do it. Whether you've got any skills or any ideas of coding, or even if you've got no idea whatsoever, just go and be part of a team. There is definitely an emphasis on not trying to shut yourself down and just sit there in a team and code away and get as much done as possible. It's people helping people install Visual Studio Code or get Git working or understand the higher level things. There's lots of great teams and interesting stuff going on. It's just a lot of fun. We were in the European hackathon. European hackathon. Last year I was in the US hackathon. It was interesting to see how it had grown. And also the European hackathon, we got a chance to use VMware Cloud on AWS. So that was an option as opposed to the super microservers that William Lamb has built. And also I think that's interesting, talking to the guys from VMware Code, is that they're looking to, because if they can use VMware Cloud on AWS, expand hackathons and try and introduce them vMugs or things like that, whereas trying to ship someone with the super micros limits that scale of where you could actually start to do hackathons. So it was a lot of fun.
What ended up being built at the hackathon? Anything cool?
Yeah, so the team I was in was, we were looking at Clarity, so the HTML5 open source UI that they're putting across various bits. It was interesting. There seemed to be an assumption that our team were a group of Clarity experts or Angular or Node.js, and none of us had any experience at all. We were just like, this makes sense in terms of Clarity. It looks really interesting. Let's get together as a team and do something with it. So we put it on top of a server to do Pixie boots of ESXi host and kind of deploy ESXi. But to be honest, that was a means to an end. It was just, we need something to sit on top underneath. So we'll put Clarity. There was another team doing Clarity as well. But I think what was really interesting is Clarity was being used by a number of different teams as well. So it wasn't their primary goal was to put Clarity in, but they introduced Clarity as well. So there was, I think the team that won were introducing some speed improvements to the checks you can do, the vcheck scripts, and they used the Clarity interface to display how they'd sped up some of those scripts, and they had also done 50 odd commits into GitHub and the actual project that's there, the public project for that. So that was really interesting to see. And there was another team playing with actual hardware, so lights and diodes and things like that to sort of, if there was an error or something in your environment, to alert it physically, to which in their demo they ran across and unplugged a cable from the switch, and everyone sat expectantly, and then a few seconds later this alarm went off and these lights changed from green to red, which was pretty cool, and this big sort of light stick. So yeah, just lots of fun and free beer night in Barcelona. What can go wrong?
Oh, I did see, I think, a Twitter picture from Richard Garsthagen talk about old school VMworld Europe guy who's now at Oracle, but he had a suitcase full of lights and flashing things. So I think that might have been, it was interesting, might have been him. Well, hey, one other kind of point. I'm actually working with a vendor, different software vendor, who actually has a very similar problem, right? They have an API, but the API actually needs HTML5 and a lot of JavaScript and things like that skills. And so they can train on their API, but really they need to train on web dev skills now, and their subject matter experts aren't web developers. So there is this kind of weird, like, we're at this weird place where vendors have to teach mainstream web development front-end skills to get their back-end APIs working. I don't know, it's just kind of an interesting, by the time you standardize, then you have a whole stack to learn. I just thought it was kind of interesting. Anything else on the hackathon?
Well, I think the main thing I take away from it is not just about getting a successful project. It's about the process as well. I find, especially in the States, that a lot of the teams that did well, they just showed a good, distinct process. Even if they didn't get the project completed, they showed what they wanted to go out and achieve and the relevant building blocks. But the one key thing, as you said there, APIs. I think the biggest thing over the next year is going to be getting standardized APIs is going to be king, or just them talking to one another.
Standardized from VMware or from other places too? I
think across other vendors. My personal feel is a lot of vendors now are releasing REST APIs for a lot of their products. I'm not going to mention too many names, but you look at most even storage vendors or backup vendors now, they will have an API that you can integrate with. And if you want to do something fancy with VMware, well, bit of scripting one afternoon, be it in PowerShell or whatever, you might have yourself a nice new little tool.
Can you elucidate for me, is the VMware code program, is that more about like VMware APIs, or is that really about kind of VMware's open source projects, or a little of both?
It's a bit of both. I bumped into the VMTN team. I did a interview with all of them on the Open Tech Cast. So there's a few bits of their views on there. I know there's a big push for them to just get a lot more community members on there. So they are looking at third-party integrations as well. Me and Alan were joking about it. He's making the demo that we all saw at the event open source for people to play with. He wants to. We were joking that I might even try and start amending that to work on an Oculus Rift. We're talking about his vcheck script. All the different things. Even before we recorded, said, "Oh, have I done anything with a certain storage vendor?" And I started thinking, well, actually, I have put some thought into kind of take a snapshot with the vendor here, then call my backup API and marry the two together, because there's nothing there at the moment. And they like putting that kind of stuff up on the repository.
Nice. I think people just need to kind of give it a go, don't they? I spoke to Alan afterwards. So obviously Alan Renault that did the on-stage bit in Europe with the 3D that Gareth's talking about. And Alan's story around how he got involved with PowerShell and automation is just the same as anyone else, that he was being asked to do something very repetitive. So he did it. He kind of learned a bit of PowerShell, and he's gone from next job to next job, and he's now a product manager at VMware and ended up on the general note stage. So just give it a go. Just save yourself some time, automate something, and see where you go at the end of it. You don't have to be a developer to be able to kind of start automating some of your processes and making your life a little bit easier.
Hey, so speaking of Open Tech Cast, you guys got to interview Pat Gelsinger. You want to talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, that was really good. Really enlightening for us. It's nice to see where he sees the company going. There's a lot of different things that he's got views on. And the one key thing for me that I took away is not even tech related. Is he says, make that work-life balance happen. Happy wife, happy life got involved in there, and whatever you can get paid, whatever kind of job you're doing, you make sure it's something you're happy with. And literally in the last couple of minutes, I've just had the green light. We actually spoke to Sanjay as well. So that will be going out there tonight as well. So we're going to have 2 complementing podcasts to go out on that. I suggest if anyone wants to have a listen, I find it really intriguing. It's nice to see where he sees the company going as well. Same with Sanjay. I won't give too much away. But yeah, it's really interesting to see how these guys want to evolve the company and make it, successful across, as we've all spoken on here, across many different vectors. Be that, services or the main thing that I just keep taking away from it is it's all about the consumption of the user. It always has been for me, but it's that real emphasis on users don't care. They just want to consume your services, be it a web page, app, whatever. You need to get it to them there quick and stable, really.
Yeah,
I think.
Go ahead.
So I think, congratulations on the podcast with the recording with Pat. I think it was really interesting. It wasn't necessarily technical focused. It was just talking about his family and his background, diversity within VMware, and you were talking about work-life balance. And then towards the end, you touched on sort of the future and where he sees things going. But it was it wasn't really what I expected, maybe, but it was really good actually. So yeah, definitely worth a listen.
Cool.
Nice.
I think one of the things when I spoke to him was he kind of touched upon we want to be selling solutions, not products, and it's something that he seems to be pushing quite heavily across VMware now, that he wants the company to stop talking about products. Someone spoke specifically around VRA, and he went, yeah, VRA is there. It's an important part of it, but I don't want us to be actively saying, have you got VRA in your environment? Wants to be focusing on the problems and selling the solutions. I don't know if that's anything new. Anyone that's involved in sales, solution selling has been a thing for quite a long time, but I think it's important that VMware are recognizing that and are looking at the problems that the customers have and how to solve those now, rather than just making products.
Yeah, I think VMware specifically is very product focused. That's how we grew up, right? In US, there was the opening acts community event was Sunday, the day before, and I started the first panel, and it was the very first question of the very first panel was, what does VMware do anyway? And actually, the panel had kind of a little tough time with that. Like, what does VMware do? And we kind of struggled with, is it a platform? Is it, what exactly is it? And I actually ended up talking with VMware, some execs, and we had some, I wanted some, it was an interesting conversation. It was a little sharp at times, but I was pushing. But the answer was VMware does the hard things. VMware does the hard plumbing infrastructure things that nobody else can do. AWS, Google, Oracle, Microsoft are coming down from the top, but they, especially, maybe not Microsoft, but the other folks are having a hard time once you get to the infrastructure and management of all these things that VMware manages. And the same way, storage and networking and things like that. So I guess cloud glue, or it's glue, and it's an infrastructure layer, and it's whatever they're willing to do. Anything that's hard, they're willing to do, which is not quite satisfying, but I completely understand.
Getting that message out there is got to definitely be a focus from VMware. The amount of people you will ask, have you got VMware? And they just refer to VMware as vSphere. It's kind of that sort of, people just call it Veeam. Veeam is backup, vSphere is ESXi and all those other good things. But I mean, we've just all been to the largest virtualization conferences of this year, and how much of this podcast or this webinar, we ended up speaking about security and networking. We haven't actually mentioned anything about performance, I/O, bandwidth, or any of those things that we would have been talking about all those years ago. We've been talking about microsegmentation, automation, security, and all those kind of things. The world's changing. Let's bring it back up to the industry then. What do you think of the show floor in the U.S.? Show floor was big, more booths than ever, bigger booths than ever. Again, not a whole lot of DevOps, but everybody else was there. So what do you guys think of we've had some consolidation in the industry. Storage has both investment and some, winding down. We got to take this video. We got to park this video in the car park, in the garage soon. But let's talk about the industry stuff. Anybody thoughts on where this industry we call enterprise infrastructure, cloud technology is going?
Oh, well, actually, I think, I couldn't thank Pat and Sanjay enough for their talk, but I think the one thing that they see the industry going is they joke, the arms dealer, or, that one person would come to, or, everyone's becoming frenemies. That, the industry is shrinking, everyone's buying each other out, and, they should all work together rather than all, you do still get, I should say, I'm only saying this as the expert, I walked up to one or two stands and I found some standoffish things. Oh, you've got that bag, or you got this. And I started thinking, guys, we want to go out there, get your name out in the community, but try and learn just to play together nicely, because at the end of the day, we're going to get your name out there. And also you're going to find that you're still choosing the right tool for the job. You can go from one of the, as you said, the US was very big compared to the EU one I've been to. The US was very big, very flashy, very showy. And
lots of money.
Lots of money, yeah, lots of money. But it's interesting to still see that some of the innovative startups are now starting to chase the heels of these bigger brands. Some of the startups I actually reckon have bigger booths than some of the big guys.
True. What are you referring to as startups? What kind of generation? Are these totally new, or are they the kind of
I would say
pure storage?
Like your pure storage, you got people at Rubrik. They had I would say a very significant stand at the US one, right bang in the middle, really caught your eye, right alongside Veeam, and then you had Cohesity to your left. So it was really interesting seeing the fact they had a good amount of the sales floor, and you saw other people that you'd expect further forward, like one of the Dell stands and the Intel stands and the NVIDIA stands were quite far to the back. Even the Nutanix stand I would have felt would have been closer to the cell.
They've been banned, I'd imagine. They've been pushed off to the side.
They were right next to VMware in the US, so they weren't off to the side at all.
They weren't in Europe. They kind of you went as far as you could go, past the toilets, past the food, and wait a minute, there's Nutanix in the corner.
Yeah.
And interesting, in Europe there was no Cisco. No Cisco, no Commvault, no Symantec. There were AWS, Google Cloud, and CloudBees.
Interesting.
Puppet were there.
Anybody want to go? Oh, go ahead.
I think it's going to be interesting to see where the show goes in terms of vendors. I couldn't help but walk around there and thinking that some security companies could make a huge killing there. People that really wouldn't have cared about the virtualization industry or virtualization admins before. I'm thinking, wait a minute, why aren't these guys there? Because there would be such an interesting story for them to tell. And maybe that's kind of the future of the show, that the showcase no longer becomes a collection of people that work closely with VMware and relate with VMware technologies, but they are solutions that are completely different in a completely different arena, but they're now going to start appealing to the IT administrator, the business, the CIO, anyone that is having an interest in the technical solutions. Maybe it's a good showcase for those kind of people. As you say, there's so much consolidation going on in the industry. Certainly in Europe, there was a lot smaller amount of storage startups. In fact, someone said to me, well, the storage industry is kind of done now, isn't it? Not that it's going, not that numbers are going to start falling, but it's not interesting anymore. It's commodity. You can get a ton of IO from anybody. Everyone's moving on to hyperconverge, which you've got your 3, 4, 5 players that are kind of doing what they're doing with that. We need to move on to something else, really.
There's a number of players who are at the stage where they are establishing their U.S. market presence. Maybe they've raised $50 million or more, but they weren't ready to go to Europe yet. So that tells you something.
People like Datrium.
Yeah.
And they have a big stand in the US.
Yeah. They're doing well. They are client. Disclaimer.
But there is also the other side of the money, because some people, some partners, some company maybe are just going to the US because they have some kind of visibility. Maybe they are a new company and with new solution that for Europe maybe are too early. Or simple, there are a lot of companies that are just going to other type of conference also, and they're trying to collect, to find the maximum effect, the maximum results from each company. So US is a bigger show compared to the European one. And we saw from the solution exhibition that the number of companies was completely different. The ecosystem is great, is huge. If you see the ecosystem of NSX, of vSphere and other products, but we don't see each company in the solution area because you have to found the budget, found also how effective you can be, and which kind of solution are you targeting? Because how a company can be successful is which kind of solution you can solve, and which kind of market can you target. So we in Europe, I don't know if there were less company compared to past year. For sure, every year they are less compared to the US. Mm-hmm. But different type of company in Europe maybe compared to US because also
I see more spend by some of the big system integrators and things like that in Europe. So Atos and whoever else. Hey, so let's we got to end this thing. Lightning round, real quick. I'm going to go in order. Give me a word or two answer. I'm going to go down the list in the order that I see you. The first question is: will you be at a cloud-oriented event sometime in the next 6 months where there's going to be more AWS and Google and then VMware? Sometime in the next 6 months, going to a cloud event. Sam, yes or no?
Yeah, most likely.
Chris?
Yeah, probably.
Gareth?
Yep, IP Expo in a few weeks.
Yeah. Barry?
Yeah, same as Gareth.
Yeah. Andrea?
Probably, yes.
And the same maybe for a DevOps show, a DevOps or Dev show? Sam?
Less likely.
Chris?
I'd like to, but less likely, yeah. Gareth?
Yep, IP Expo has it all under one roof.
A lot of DevOps stuff there too. Barry, you're going to be there too? Yep.
Yeah, I'm not really connecting with the DevOps stuff myself. I've got my hands full with EUC and servers and all that kind of stuff.
Mr. Mauro?
Yeah, I would like, but I'm not a developer, so I would like just to see how the show is big, which kind of partner are theirs, and the type of attendees.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah. No, it's always the case. I'm going to try to go to AWS reInvent, but it's a Zoom, man. It's going to be like 50,000 people or more. Next question: how was the food at Barcelona? Sam?
Awful.
Chris?
I thought it was great.
Gareth?
I was only at the States, so I can't comment.
Oh, you were on the States. Okay. Barry?
Same as always.
Andrea?
Worse than Italian food.
Last question. Overall, give us 2 grades in the American style, A through F. One for VMware and then one for kind of your experience at the show. Sam?
AA.
Okay. Chris?
I'd say a B+ improving for VMware and AAA for VMworld. Had a blast.
Awesome. Gareth?
AA.
Barry?
I've got to agree with Chris, really. Much improving from VMware. They've got a focus now, they've got a vision, and they're actually doing it. And amazing experience. It's all about the people. It's all about connecting and networking with people.
Okay. And Andrea?
Yeah, quite the same. And what I see is that the hackathon has grown a lot, really. And probably strategy of VMware could be a way to attract developer people, unless it's not only for developer, but can be a different way to try to attract other people and bring more DevOps in VMware. Let's see.
It's good. Yeah. Software defined, man. That's the way to go. I'm going to give you the last word. Everybody, thank you very much. Oh, hey, maybe plug yourself since you're here, since we're all we had some folks. Torsten Volk left, and CTO advisor Keith Townsend left, and Jens Soldner never made it on the show. I was going to ask him about VRA and automation and things like that, since he literally wrote a book on it. Sam, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Sam McGeown or on my blog definite.co.uk.
Chris Porter.
I'm Upright Vinyl on Twitter and uprightvinyl.co.uk as my blog. Gareth Edwards.
At Gareth Edwards 86, virtualizefruit.co.uk or OpenTechCast on iTunes.
Oh God, were you born in ’86?
Yeah.
You're like a small child.
I know.
Anyway, Barry Coombs.
At virtualizereal on Twitter, definetomorrow.co.uk, and recently started a podcast, so head over to iTunes and search for Define Tomorrow.
Oh yeah, and then also Gareth, your podcast is
OpenTechCast.
Okay.
We're on Stitcher, iTunes, soon to be Google Store.
Let's turn this into a podcast. Andrea Mauro.
Yeah, Andrea_Mauro is the Twitter handle, and vinfrastructure.it is the blog site.
Awesome. Well, for those of you who are at your VMugs or wherever, Godspeed and good luck. Thanks, everybody. You can it's Friday night. Go have a pint, and I'll get to my work day. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers, John.
Cheers. Thanks.
Cheers.